Welcome. On today's episode, we're going to see what is the Mustang. So in a few of my other videos, you probably heard me talking about the Mustang a little bit. This car is actually really special, mostly to me, but also in the way that it's built. So we're going to go through that today, and I want to go through what the car is, what's been done to it, and we're going to go for a drive and maybe do some cool things out in Mexico, which just, quick put the Mustang into a transporter and have it shipped out there, and I'll meet it out there. But let's go through it. Let's go through this very unique, very special build. So this car in general, it's an 89 Mustang GT that has a Cervini's Cobra body kit on it, and that's been on there for quite some time. Also, I've owned the car since I was 16. This was my very first car. I'm 35 years old, so if you guys can do the math, that means I've had it for 19 years, and in March it'll be 20 years I've had this car. It came out of Florida. It was, I believe, owned by a chick, because in the back seat I found scrunchies and sand and lip gloss and lipstick and everything else. The thing's actually in pretty good shape. I bought it with 108,000 miles on it, and now it has 115,000 miles on it. I can't read. 131,000 miles on it. So in 19 years, I've put on a little bit of mileage, not a ton. I did have to drive it in the winter the first year that I owned it. Kind of the restoration bodywork stuff began in, I would say, 2007, 2006, and it got repainted completely. It's kind of hard to see in this light. Let's see if I can get the flash to show it. But it does have a metallic, like a pearl, in the paint. You can kind of see it a little bit. And then I'd say about 3 years ago, maybe longer than that, 3-4 years ago, I was grabbing something off the top shelf here. And there, that bucket that's still up there, but now has nothing in it. That's hard. I dropped a stock crank pulley on that fender and just completely smooshed the shit out of it. It was aftermarket fenders, and since it has bigger wheels, they were 91 to 93 fenders, which are bigger. So after that whole debacle, I went and sourced some factory 91 through 93 fenders. I had a friend help me redo the front of the car. We added the relief in the part of the cowl of the hood. That way the charge pipe can not be hitting it anymore, because it was hitting the hood and starting to wear through it. With that intake, it's so tall that it literally comes right off the throttle body and goes right into that part of the hood. So we also did air catch latches. The flush mount, I know these aren't the ones with the bracket on the top, but I am utilizing the factory latch still. And so the only thing technically holding this hood down is these screw heads, but it's been doing fine. It's a lot better than the secondary latch. Gives me some pretty good confidence when I'm going just a little bit quicker than I should be, because I know that these, it's a hardwood hood. It's a hardwood 4-inch hood, but they like to separate because they're two pieces of fiberglass up front, and they're known for, sometimes with the factory latch, either breaking this out, you can see it's starting to wear a little bit, or they start separating here. And so under high under hood pressure from going quick, because the air goes up but that has no way to come out, luckily that's what the extraction hood's for also, but then it'll separate that top and bottom half and blow out. So makes me feel better. All right, the engine is a Dart SHP 408 stroker from fordstrokers.com, or Ford Strokers. Took about 6 months to build. It's got scat 4340 crank and rods, and then it has Wiseco nylon brushed pistons that give it about a 9.5 to 1 compression ratio. It has 10-year-old AFR 205s on it. Actually, I think they're 15 years old. They're old AFR 205s. Trick flow R lower and the box upper. And the turbos are twin comp 6767 with a 0.81 AR housing. The hot side is a B&G header kit. It came with downpipes and originally went through the 6 and 7 primary, but that liked to burn plug wires and was just terrible. So I converted it to a manual brake setup using an 85, 84 Ranger master cylinder to kick all the lines that way to get out of the way of the turbo stuff. And then I remade both of the downpipes to go all the way back and down. I kind of had to put them into an oval shape in order to do that. Everything is extremely tight down there. It kind of touches in some places, but it's good to go. And let's see, it's got Bosch 105 injectors, MagnaFuel 4303 fuel pump setup. It's got a Tremec T56 Magnum transmission, a D&D aluminum drive shaft, which I've been trying to get a chromoly one so I can get 1350 U-joints front and back. No-name radiator that I've had since like 2005. That's been perfectly fine. And yes, I'm weird. I'm running the mechanical fan. I like it though because it doesn't do any amp draw and it always has airflow going through the engine. And then when it does warm up, obviously that clutch locks harder and then it actually cools even better. Other than that, it's just, you know, a dash 8 feed, dash 8 return, MagnaFuel regulator. And everything else doesn't really matter that much. It's a factory housing with welded tubes on the differential, 355 Eaton True Track 31 spline motors with extended wheel studs, and then American Muscle wheels, which they don't make these anymore. They're actually very cheap. I think they were like $159 for the front and then $199 for the rears each. And it's a 18 by 7 up front and an 18 by 10 and a half out back on a 305/40 Nitto. I've done the Mickeys. I don't like them. They're a little bit too sticky. And then they like to ball up and then you got to rotate them constantly. And I only got about 1,500 miles out of mine. So, and then the batteries in the back. This is probably the most unfinished part of the car. And I finally, after 15 years of shitty hood struts or hatch struts, I got some Redline tuning hatch struts. And so they actually lift the entire back of the hatch by itself without needing too much assistance. So this is original carpeting. I never replaced it. I was gonna make a template back here so the carpet doesn't fall down, but here's all my solenoids and everything else. Due to the length of the wire, and then there's my fuel pump wiring going into there and some sound matting. Obviously the battery. Oh, this is hard to push it. Due to the length of the wire, if you take the trigger 12 volt that powers the factory coil and you run it all the way back there, I only got 9 volts at the back, so the thing wouldn't start. So I had to make a separate solenoid in order to kick the voltage for the line to go to the starter and then do a relay system off of the factory key switch to a dedicated 12 volt that actually is 12 volts all the way to the back of the solenoid. I know that doesn't make any sense, but believe me, it works. So that's it for the most part. The car's been babied most of its life. It's not really driven in the rain. There's really no rust or rot on the entire thing. Like I said, it was a Florida car until it came up here in 2001. And then I think it was driven by me in the rain or the snow once for one season. So other than that, it does have a tubular K-member, and just little things here and there. Like I said, the rest really doesn't matter too much. The car's pretty special for me, and it's kind of special for Foxes around here in general. With the old engine, before the Dart SHP and the additional compression, it had a stock 74 351 block with a scat rotating assembly in it. Same head, same intake. Made 730 horsepower on 10 pounds and 762 foot-pounds of torque. And so with the additional compression, and I'm pretty sure the other engine was hurt on that dyno run, this thing should easily make over 700 wheel or 750 wheel on 10 pounds, which, as you'll see, she's pretty peppy. There's not really any need to turn it up on the street at all because it just kind of spins. But with that being said, let's go for a drive. a end clip for the end of this video. So here's some pictures of the Mustang engine bay. If you guys got any questions or want to see more of this car, you just let me know. Hope you enjoyed the rip in the car. I'd like to get some more out side of the car videos, but I didn't have anybody with me, and I didn't want to leave a stand outside and have to come back and get it. There seemed to be a lot of traffic around in Mexico for some reason. Must be a celebration of some sort. But otherwise, we'll see you on the next episode.